What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Ancestral New Earth podcast, a podcast committed to decolonizing consciousness and co-birthing the new earth through sacred activism. I am your host, Mama Feria. I am a ceremonial artist, a medium, a Reiki master, and an ecotherapist in training. And your girl also has a book and an album out dedicated to divine feminine awakening. Check it out. Today's topic is the Decolonial Christ Code, connecting with Christ as a form of ancestral healing and awakening. I am so excited for this topic. As always, we're going to go through a journey together, y'all. So let's get into it. First and foremost, this might sound a little controversial, right? What is a Black and Indigenous spiritual healer who is a medium and honors the ancestors and is decolonizing doing working with Jesus, working with Christianity, working with the Holy Trinity? I don't get it. I'm about to put y'all on game. Okay. So my relationship with Christ has been such a huge part of my spiritual journey. It has transformed me. It has alchemized my soul in so many ways. And it's been an incredible journey to arrive at the place that I am right now. As we all know, Christianity has been used as a tool of colonization through Roman Empire, through conquest, through patriarchy, through the colonization of Black and Indigenous people across the Americas and the world. Men used Christianity, to subjugate people, to oppress people, to demonize their spiritualities and erase our practices. And yet, your girl is here, committed to sacred activism, healing systemic oppression, honoring the ancestors, honoring the earth, restoring right relationship with the ancestors and the earth and with spirit, with God. And I also have a very deep relationship with Christ. A relationship that honestly has been one of the most beautiful things I've ever felt in my life. And again, for a lot of people, that makes no sense. On the Christian side, people might hear that I work with ancestors and facilitate sound healing and give offerings and work with crystals and pray to the earth and immediately think that I'm sinful and pagan and heretical and all that colonial bullshit. But on the spiritual side, especially in the BIPOC healing spaces, there's often resistance to Christ. There's anger at Christianity, and rightfully so, validly so, okay? I'm not here to try to take anyone's anger away. I'm not here to try to invalidate anybody's anger and emotions towards colonial Christianity and empire. But I have found myself between these two worlds. I found myself between these two sides that are often roaring at each other. And that's what this episode is about. This episode is about the bridge. Okay, so I personally believe that Christ is a bridge. I believe that Christ is a bridge to the healed ancestors. I believe that Christ is a bridge to God. I believe that Christ teaches people how to walk humbly and access their power, how to live in loving awareness and access fierce strength, how to be human while also being in deep relationship with the divine and embody their spiritual power. I can't separate Christianity from its incredibly tragic, violent, and oppressive history that still continues to subjugate people today. But I can separate Christ from empire. I can separate Christ from colonization. I can separate Christ from the distortions that human beings created in his name. And it took me a while to do that. So the question is, how do we walk with Christ while honoring the ancestors? How do I love Jesus while also being committed to decolonization? This is my journey. So, for those of you who don't know, I've been a medium and Crystal Reiki master for almost 10 years now, predominantly serving BIPOC, people of color, women of color, queer folks, and redline communities. In the beginning of my spiritual path, it was all New Age. I learned about my spirituality through online New Age content creators. I learned about the Akashic Records and astral projection. And even though the New Age has taught me a lot and it has opened many doors for me, in time, I also realized that the New Age carries so much white, colonial, patriarchal, capitalistic conditioning that continues to perpetuate the very same issues that we have been going through for the past 500 years. A lot of the New Age can be deeply disconnected from indigenous, earth-based, ancient ways of being and out of relationship with many people of color on the planet. So, when I realized that, I spent about 2 years decolonizing my spirituality from the white, Western, colonial New Age. And as I started to heal personal trauma and personal baggage, I also began to realize that so much of what I carried was not only personal, it was ancestral, it was generational. And so when I started decolonizing my spirituality, that's when I really started getting into ancestral healing genocidal wounds, healing slavery wounds, returning to the original ways of my Black and Indigenous ancestors. I started to learn how to work with the ancestors, how to honor the ancestors, and how to receive strength and wisdom from the other side. I also became prouder of my roots, prouder of who I am. I'm first generation Dominican woman, which means I carry Black, Taino, and Spanish ancestry. And in my journey of decolonizing spirituality, I really began to return to my ancestral ways of walking with the divine, and started really embracing African spirituality and Taino spirituality. And and there was a point in my practices where I felt so embodied in my spirituality and in my gifts and in my path, except there was one thing. Even though I kind of dabbled in like Spanish, like pagan, Celtic, most of my Spanish ancestors practiced the oppressive religion of Catholicism, Christianity, and there was a huge block. I was really having struggle accessing my whole self because I was carrying so much anger towards my Spanish ancestors. There was so much resistance and pain around my Spanish ancestry. And that resistance also came with resistance to Christianity, resistance to Christ, resistance to any dogmatic religion that has caused so much unspeakable pain and chaos in the world. And it was around this time that I met my friend Trinity. So if I should check her out, Trinity Music on Instagram. And she also has a website, I think trinitymusic.com. But Trinity is a Black spiritual Christian healer, an artist, a musician, a sound healer. And when I met her, she had this energy about her to her that I couldn't really explain. It was like harmony and peace and balance and completion. And it was very different than the new age folks that I would usually find and connect. And after a few months of knowing her, she told me that she was a Christian. And she started telling me about Christ. She started telling me about my African roots of Christianity. She started talking to me about how Jesus was Black, how Mother Mary was Black, how Christianity itself has been colonized and used by the white men when it was actually created by Black and brown people. And though at the time I thought that was beautiful, I'm like, okay, cool, nice, but hello, people are still oppressed to this day. So I didn't fully resonate. I was like, all right, yeah, that's nice, but like that's a whole bunch of bullshit. Like I'm not trying to practice Christianity. I'm not trying to let anybody convert me, because at the time I thought that loving Christ and being a Christian meant abandoning all of my mediumship and my sound healing and my interest in plant medicine and all these things for the Bible. That's the image that I had. So I was like, that's cool, but next. And even though that is true, and that's the resistance that I was experiencing, I started feeling pulled towards Christ even before I met her. So even before I met her, every time I heard the name Jesus, every time I heard Yeshua, every time I saw a cross, every time I heard Christian music, it was like my heart was opening. It was like there was this peace that was ushering itself into me, this faith, this completion, this wholeness. It was like my heart was being awakened and healed. And in time and through time, I resisted it until I met my girl Trinity. And basically, to make it simple, I was going through an ego death, an identity crisis. I was like, whoa, I can't be doing all this decolonial ancestral healing shit and then also love Jesus. Like, this makes no sense. So I just was in disassociation with that and complete denial and anger, frankly. Because again, at the time, I thought surrendering to Christ meant losing everything. I thought it meant giving up my mediumship, giving up spirituality, giving up ancestral healing, and giving up the whole life that I had spent almost 10 years building. But Trinity was basically the first time person who really showed me that it might be possible to love Christ and still be deeply spiritual. It's possible to be an ancestral healer, to honor the earth, and to be decolonial and love Jesus. And even though I knew that, I was still, for years, going back and forth. I would feel pulled towards Christ, and then I would reject him because of ancestral trauma and because of reactions to the very real systemic oppression that we all experience because of anger. And I want to say this clearly for the people who are listening, that conflict is valid. Okay, something that I wish I could have given myself during those times was validation and self-compassion, because it is very valid to experience all those emotions and all that anger in response to 500 years of systemic oppression. So if you are awakening into your relationship with Christ and there's conflict, go slow, be gentle with yourself. Historical trauma is real. Present trauma under Christianity is real. Building relationship with Christ, especially as a Black and Indigenous woman, especially as someone on a decolonial path, is a process. So, about a couple months later, something really dramatic happened. I went through an incredibly traumatic mushroom ceremony. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I was unconscious, naked, bleeding for 12 hours tripping. It was my first time tripping. I was around a whole bunch of white men. Some guys ended up in jail. Another guy ended up in the hospital. I was getting attacked by demons. It was crazy. It brought up so much fear, terror, violation, like so much trauma in a way that shattered me. When we got out of the ceremony, I began having dreams and visions around death. I started having dreams and visions that I was going to die and that my friend was going to die. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw dark figures. Every time I closed my eyes, I was like hearing people talking to me. It was just like absolute terror and fear. And I was trying my best to cope with life. I was doing everything normally. Like I didn't really pause to process it. I saw a therapist, but it didn't really help. I just kept on going and things kept getting darker and darker until eventually my best friend who attended the ceremony with me overdosed, which is exactly what I saw in the vision. And something else I saw in the vision is that I also died with her. And so it was incredibly scary. I was losing hair. I was scared for my life. I was seeing darkness everywhere. But I had a complete mental breakdown. And when she passed, God bless her soul, I took a semester break from school, and like literally a semester before I graduated, and went back to my hometown and really did some inner work. And in that time, I was so afraid. I just remember all of the Christian Catholic stuff I heard growing up about the New Age is demonic, spiritual demonic, don't do this, don't open portals, don't do that. It all came in 500% when I was going through this mental breakdown, and I let go of everything. I let go of the new age. I let go of my spiritual identity. I let go of mediumship, Reiki. I got on my knees and I prayed to Jesus. I prayed to God and I said, God, Christ, Yeshua, show me the way, cleanse me, purify my path. If this spiritual path is truly for me, bring me into alignment, bring it back into alignment. And if it is not, then I surrender it. I give it to you. So I basically gave my life to God. And in that time, I thought I was going to die. Like, it's a real feeling. And I just remember saying, God, I give my life to you. Whatever it is that I need to let go, I give it to you. Just please let me keep my life. And yeah, that moment changed everything for me. Since then, I went back to my hometown, Jersey, and I spent about 5 months in deep surrender. I was going to church. I was learning about the Bible, learning about how the Bible had been rewritten through power and empire, learning how Christianity has been used to oppress people, but also how it's been used to liberate people of color, learning about colonial Christianity, African roots of Christianity, Ethiopian Christianity, Gnostic Christianity, Sophia, the Divine Mother, the erasure of the Divine Mother, and how the Holy Spirit is actually the Divine Mother. I learned about the feminine mystery traditions and the lineage of Black women and Black priestesses that eventually raised Mother Mary, and how the Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene were priestesses in this lineage of the feminine mystery traditions and womb healing. And it was just like, I went into this whole rabbit hole, but learning about the decolonized version of Christianity. And I was going through all this. Christ kept coming to me in my dreams, in prayer and meditation, and every time my body would be full with so much love and light and peace. And even though I was scared for my life, I didn't know if I was going to go back to Colorado. I didn't know if I was going to go back to school. I didn't know if I was going to continue being a spiritual healer. Mind you, this is 10 years of work being built up. I let go of all of it. I had the biggest ego death of my entire freaking life. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I felt so ashamed to talk to my friends and to talk to people. I was completely isolated in my community with no one to talk to going through all this. But every time I prayed to Christ, there was this deep faith and this deep peace that I was automatically filled up with, where Christ would just say, don't be afraid, I am with you. And meditation, when I would meditate, I would like kind of go in and out of that feeling. Like when I would do yoga, I would go in and out of that feeling. I love meditation, I love yoga, but when I fully surrendered to Christ, when I prayed to Christ, it was like directly being in communion with God. And I've never felt that before. And that's when I started understanding Christ differently. For me, Christ became the frequency of God. It became the frequency of unconditional love, the frequency of humility and surrender and faith and compassion and truth and innocence and purity. I Through my experience with Christ, the Christ code became for me the code of love itself. And the more that I learned the more that I realized how compatible Christ is with my ancestral and spiritual path. I started having visions of my African and Taino ancestors asking me to surrender to Christ. I started having visions of healing between my lineages. It was like the war inside of my blood began to settle. It was like my African, Indigenous, and Spanish ancestors were all being brought into the light of Christ and experiencing wholeness and peace. Once again, it was like I experienced the complete healing of my bloodline through the return to Christ. And in that moment, I realized that Christ didn't erase my path. Christ purified my path. Basically, I died and was resurrected. And I found that at the core of who I wasn't a spiritual healer. I wasn't Mama Feria. I wasn't a singer. I wasn't this content creator. I was a daughter of the divine. I was a daughter of God, and I was made of love and faith. And there were so many moments where I just felt God's love so powerful, like just wash over me, where it's just like I didn't have a care or any fear in the world because I knew that God loved me. And as long as God loves me, I am good. And through that ego death, through everything being torn apart, that love for God and that faith in the divine became my new foundation. And once that foundation was established, it was like everything that I built came back, but more purified. It was after that that a lot of my spiritual gifts started coming back. My mediumship, slowly, bit by bit, Christ started bringing back my Reiki, my sound healing. But it was almost built on this foundation, this different foundation, where before a lot of my mediumship and a lot of my spiritual healing was built on narcissism, on ego, on wanting validation and wanting to be seen, wanting to be appreciated and loved and connected. My new foundation was built on complete surrender and trust and faith in God and complete devotion to God and to the divine. And ever since that's become my new foundation, my business is so much more clearer. My business is so much more grounded. And my business is so much more in alignment with the divine because it's coming from the pure heart of God rather than ego. And another huge gift that came through Christ was discernment. So, in the Bible, they talk about like, don't trust all spirits, don't open all portals. A part of the reason why a lot of people who jump from New Age to Christianity, like what ends up happening basically is that in the New Age, there are no rules. The New Age, again, is colonial. It doesn't have any elders, no protection. You're opening up all these portals. There are literal spirits, thousands, millions of spirits waiting for a portal to be opened up into the physical world. And as a medium of 10 years, I can see this, I feel this, I hear this. They're waiting for a portal to be opened up into the physical world so that they can have power in the systems and they can create more chaos. When people who are not strongly connected to God, strongly protected, strongly rooted in their ancestors, they open up these portals and then it creates chaos in their life. So Christ gave me the gift of discernment. Before Christ, I was moving really openly in the spiritual realms. I was working with different energies, different spirits, different beings, sometimes without enough discernment at all, without clarity, without initiation. I was just like, ooh, Aphrodite, ooh, Isis. And it was in time, especially during my mental breakdown, where a lot of these spirits that I used to work with revealed their true nature to me, and they actually showed me that they were actually entities or demons the entire time. And so when I was with Christ like showed me how to see more clearly, and I began to understand that not every spirit presents itself as light, not every presence deserves access to me, and not every energy is aligned. So I would start calling on Christ, and that would bring in purification. It brought clarity, it brought protection, it brought simplicity. And now I am definitely more discerning with which spirits I work with. And in order for any spirit to come into my aura, it has to come through the gates of Christ. And as a medium and a spiritual healing practitioner, that's very important. Yeah. And so it's absolutely beautiful because my spiritual gifts didn't weaken through Christ. They actually became stronger. Again, like I said before, divine feminine healing came back, womb healing came back, discernment came back, everything returned in a more purified way. I had more connection to my ancestors, I had more discernment, my connection to the earth became stronger. Even my connection to my queerness, to my sexuality, to my activism became stronger. I began leaning more into land back and rematriation or reparations, and really understanding how Christ, the words of Christ and the way that Christ walked the earth was inherently in alignment with the mission and the vision and the values of sacred activism. Christ was an activist, and so my activism became stronger with Christ. And I realized that Christ is not separate from liberation. Christ is liberation. Christ is a a birther of the new earth, right? Christ is working and collaborating with collective liberation for all sentient beings. Christ wants collective liberation for all through dismantling systems of oppression and healing your spirit, your mind, and your soul. And another gift that Christ gave to me was the gift of simplicity. Sometimes the new age spiritual world can become so complicated. There are so many dimensions and rituals, and Christ taught me the gift of simplicity. So many times in my new age spiritual healing journey, I thought that I always had to, it was almost like a to-do checklist. It was like, I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to meditate, and I have to eat green, and I have to do my affirmations. But when I came to Christ, I realized that the truth of God is something so simple. It's about having faith, first and foremost, being a good person, loving God, loving yourself, love your neighbor, tell the truth, take accountability, be humble, but don't shy away from your power, have compassion, heal your heart. They were such simple instructions, and frankly, so refreshing and different from the addictive, escapist, fast pace of New Age spirituality. He taught me that spirituality is not just about what I do or what tools I use or what practices I follow. It's about the condition of the heart. It's about integrity. It's about whether you are rooted in love. And so you can practice African voodoo and still walk the path of Christ. You can do limpias and danza and still walk the path of Christ. You can have relationship with orishas and still walk the path of Christ. You can honor the earth and still walk the path of Christ. And it was only the inversion and the distortion of the Christ code that told us anything different. Christ was supposed to be integrated into our ancestral spiritualities, not enforced. Christ actually fulfills much of what African and indigenous spiritualities talk about. The rapture is very similar to the eagle and the condor prophecy and the rainbow prophecy. What they all have in common is that during the times of the most chaos, a light will come down, either come down from the heavens or come up from within us. And we will heal as a collective, and we will come back into unity and harmony and balance as a collective, as a species, as a human species. Christ cannot be forced onto people. Christ comes to the soul when it is ready. And I've learned that Christ is in every religion. It's in every spirituality. Christ is the frequency of love itself. And every spiritual path that is rooted in love is Christ oriented. So when I say decolonizing the Christ code, what I mean is returning to love. What I mean is returning to Christ as truth. What I mean is returning to Christ as humanity. What I mean is returning to Christ as liberation, returning to Christ as something that no empire can own, actually something that can dismantle the empires. Because the frequency of Christ cannot be colonized. It can be used, but the frequency of Christ is this energy of unconditional love that is so infinite and so holy that it goes beyond any type of human perception, right? People can distort it, empires can weaponize it, institutions can invert it, but the actual frequency of Christ is the frequency of love and peace and humility and divine connection. It can't be colonized. This is what I mean by the decolonial Christ code. And that is why, for me, Christ is a bridge between the ancestors and God, and between the earth and the divine, a bridge between healing and discernment, a bridge between my lineages, a bridge between who I was and who I am becoming. And I am so grateful and so humbled to be walking this path, honoring my ancestors, doing my little curandera, my spiritual healing curandera stuff, and also loving God and loving Jesus. I hope y'all got something out of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you leave this podcast with stronger faith in your purpose, more clarity around your mission and your power. And I want to thank y'all for giving me the time and day to listen and learn about the decolonial Christ code and ancestral healing practices and sacred activism. If you want to connect more with me, go to my website, mamaferiahealingarts.com. There you can book a mediumship session, a Reiki session, or a sound healing ceremony with me. I also have a book and an album out dedicated to divine feminine awakening, and you can also find that on my website. You can also go check out my YouTube and check out my music videos. Thanks for listening. May the Divine Mother be with you, and may Christ open your heart. Ashe, ashe.